Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm Katie Olson. I'm the Executive Director of the CCM Foundation, and we also run the Special Events Office, and I'm just so pleased that you're all able to join us for this very special day as we celebrate veterans of this country. I'd first like to introduce our President, Dr. Tony Iacano.
Good morning. It's crisp weather outside. It finally feels like the weather and the scenery match now. For a while it feels like spring, but it looks like fall. It's all come together, which is really wonderful. So let me start off by thanking all of you for joining us this morning, for being here so that we can recognize, honor, appreciate, and celebrate our veterans as well. You are the reason we are here. I have a chance to talk to a number of you individually and want to say again, on behalf of County College Morris and others who are here to support you today, thank you for your service. We are the nation we are because of you. Thank you for that. We have some special guests who are with us today. Some you'll hear from, some you will not, but I do want to take a moment before we get started to recognize those individuals, and I'll be speaking about a couple of them as part of the program as well. We do have with us, I saw him in the back a moment ago, Senator Tony Bucco right up front. Okay, very good. We also have with us Commissioner Deb Smith. We have Randolph Mayor Marie Potter. And former Mayor and Councilman Jim Lovey's with us this morning also. And we have CCM longtime trustee and veteran Paul Lasitra. And also with us, CCM trustee and the First Lady of Chester, officially, Trustee Lauren Ganamort. And then we have several of our vice presidents who are with us this morning, also from our senior administrative team, Vice President Patrick Enright, Vice President Melissa Albright Enright, they are different names in there, and we have Vice President Rob Sturton, who's with us, as well as, and I want to thank our foundation for hosting this event today, our Executive Director of the CCM Foundation, Ms. Katie Olson, and her wonderful team, and the great job they've done as well. So we do have other members of our administrative team, some of our staff is in here, but we're going to go ahead with appreciation and begin our program right from there. Veterans, on your tables, you have some art. We had a number of people who came and joined us for the wall that was hosted here this summer. One of those was my wife, who's a kindergarten teacher, and a number of her colleagues, other kindergarten teachers, came out, and to teach the children about Veterans Day, they focused on that, and their children wanted to create art, so I encourage you to enjoy that and bring that home with you as well. If you haven't had children's art hanging on your fridge in a while, here's a real opportunity. But the kids were excited to do it, and we told them we'd send some pictures back as well, as they talked about in their classrooms what Veterans Day is about, the commitment the veterans have shown our nation and so forth. So they turned that into a teachable moment for our youngest students in Morris County. So with that being said, we are going to move to our Pledge of Allegiance, and I believe we have, Bill, you're leading us in that from post 7333.
Everybody rise. Set. March. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order, arm.
We are just incredibly fortunate, and we never lose sight or lack appreciation for the tremendous support this community has shown us. Community colleges thrive when they have the support of their communities, and today, like many days, is an example of that. I cannot tell you how appreciative we are of our veterans and the various posts that have come forward and supported the college and our students, particularly our veteran students over the years. The Vietnam Moving Memorial Wall only strengthened those relationships, brought new faces to CCM, people with new experiences, and we'll be working more closely than ever with them as we reimagine and further develop our veteran support services at our college. Post 7333 here in Randolph has been at the front of that and have been truly, truly instrumental, and I know will continue to be so going forward. We had the opportunity to recognize the individuals who helped bring that wall to Morris County at our board meeting a couple of months ago, but we have a couple individuals who weren't able to be there, and so I want to take a moment to recognize them and the very important role that they played in that as well. I think it was about this time last year, I got a phone call from Senator Bucco who was telling me about the Vietnam Memorial Wall, and could the college be supportive of that? And our answer is absolutely yes. And I will say, I've said before and I'll say again, anything we do for our veterans, by comparison of what our veterans have done for us in this nation, is always a small token. We can never repay you for what you've done. We can never match the commitment of what you've shown our nation. We appreciate that. And there's no way I'm saying no to the senator. He always calls on behalf of others, always highly supportive of what's best for our community, and works very hard and keeps the college in sight. So we weren't able to have him with us a couple months ago, but I want to recognize him. And I know he's very humble, so he always deflects that, but he did play a substantial role in bringing the right people together at the table, energizing that conversation, and focusing us so that we could move forward. So Senator Bucco, if you will come forward, we have a certificate of appreciation and recognition for your role in all of that. This would not have happened without you. We know that, and we appreciate that very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. There were a number of community organizations and businesses that came out to support as well, which was really exciting, right? One of the things we thrive on at a community college is working with the community, in the community, having the community on the campus is just absolutely wonderful and rich all of the time. One of those organizations, and I say it very carefully when I talk to my folks, not just Home Depot, the Dover Home Depot. Dover Home Depot was absolutely instrumental, and what a spirit they brought out with them, helping put up the lighting, donating the lighting, the materials used to frame the wall so that it would remain in place. They showed an enormous amount of pride, a lot of hard work. They came out, I think, every day that the event was going on, but a lot of rolling up those sleeves on day one, of setting up, of breaking down. So while we love all of Home Depot, the Dover Home Depot we know has been true friends in this initiative and effort, and we'd like to invite you up so that we can present that certificate to you. I will read some names in appreciation. Do know there were more individuals from the Dover Home Depot who joined us that day to support this. They're not all able to be here, probably because they're working at Home Depot, right? Or supporting somebody in the community. But we do have a number, and I want to recognize them by name, and as you hear your name, if you'll come up. Caitlin Oakley, Bambi Boughton, Donna Gonzalez, Kathy Mitazuski, Cynthia Kobalars, Phoebe Davenport, Patty Russo, and Jim Wilkinson. Okay. We're just going right along the back side? Okay, great. Good morning. Thank you. Couldn't happen without you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We're Dover. That's spectacular. It's good to see that level of pride.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you. See you again. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
You want to do a picture? You guys want to huddle up a little bit down here, or
Okay,
kind of
sure.
double up there? Okay. There you go.
Are we good? Who's missing? Nobody?
Don't forget the president.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so today's program is a little different than we've done it in the past. We had some good suggestions and so forth. We do have a featured speaker today who is a huge part of our community at CCM. She is a history professor, and it's my honor to introduce you to her. Dr. Shelley Iden has been with us for a number of years. She is a graduate of George Washington University, where she earned her baccalaureate degree. She earned her master's degree in American Studies at Columbia University and a PhD from Drew University. Her work has focused extensively on the Vietnam War and various aspects surrounding that. Her thesis was written on women's service during the Vietnam War. She's also looked at the history of the women's statue of the Vietnam Memorial in D.C. and has looked at it in a broader context, including on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in D.C. as part of her master's program as well. Prior to joining CCM, she taught at the University of Maryland, the University College of Europe, where she spent time in Germany teaching various college courses to the military community. And I will tell you, Dr. Iden, when I was at the University of Central Florida, I taught the ROTC military history class. You will never find better students anywhere, because when their commanding officer comes in and says these gentlemen will have done all of their reading, they will be fully prepared, and if you ever have a problem, let me know. Is that right, gentlemen? You hear, yes, sir. There's never a problem. Everyone is fully prepared. But to this day, I always have one thing in mind. One student who was exemplary. It was a 3-hour class of military history. We took a break. He'd always go out and smoke. I could never tell if I was making him nervous or deeply satisfied. But best students you'll ever work with. Would you concur with that? The level of discipline is absolutely exemplary. So Dr. Iden is going to speak to us today from her perspective as a scholar, as a historian, but also from a personal perspective. Her father is a Vietnam veteran, and she is currently working on collecting an oral history of his life, including his experiences in the war as well. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Shelley Iden?
Okay. Thank you for that very kind introduction. Thank you all for being here today, and I especially want to thank Katie Olson and the CCM Foundation and Colleen McCardle and the Office of Special Events for planning this today. As Dr. Iacono noted, I'm a history professor here at CCM, and I mention that because with this talk you're going to get a little bit of an idea of some of the themes that I focus on in my classroom. And one of them is that history and how it is represented is often debated. This is an important idea, as you'll see as we take a look at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. But first, let's set the stage. Before walking down the slightly sloping hill that sits near the Lincoln Memorial and begins the part of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial that has become known as the Wall, a visitor walks past the 3 servicemen statue, designed by Frederick Hart and added to the site in 1984, 2 years after the dedication of the Wall, which this year is celebrating its 40th anniversary. Next to the statue, a visitor can see a flagpole, also added in 1984, and a plaque added in 2004 that reads, "In memory of the men and women who served in the Vietnam War and later died as a result of their service. We honor and remember their sacrifice." While walking past the 500-foot-long wall designed by Maya Lin, the visitor can see the 58,318 names that are listed in chronological order by date of death, carved on the black granite. The observer will undoubtedly notice the items that have been left at the foot of the wall by others who visited that day, which the National Park Service collects and stores in a warehouse in Maryland in what has become known as the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Collection. Upon leaving the wall, visitors can see the Washington Monument in the distance, and located 300 feet away from where they are standing, the Vietnam Women's Memorial added in 1993. Almost every aspect of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial just mentioned was debated in some way, as we'll see when we take a look at the history of the memorial. The idea for a memorial to those who fought in Vietnam was first conceived, a national memorial I should say, was first conceived in March of 1979 when Jan Scruggs, a veteran of the war, saw the movie The Deer Hunter. Moved by the images of veterans struggling with the return home to the United States, Scruggs decided that a memorial should be built, as he said, as a kind of delayed victory parade, a powerful symbol of national reconciliation. He envisioned a national memorial that would list all of the names of everyone killed in Vietnam so that they would not be forgotten. But as he shared his ideas with other veterans, he found that many doubted the nation's willingness to honor anything associated with the Vietnam War. And these fears were not unfounded. The Vietnam War was one of the most divisive wars in American history, and opinions about the war still reflected this division at the time that Scruggs put forward the idea of the memorial. There was no consensus on several subjects, including should the United States have entered the war and what were the lessons of the war. Some felt the war was justified, while others thought it never should have been fought at all, among many other things that are debated about the war. The only thing all parties seemed to agree on at the time was that it shouldn't be talked about. We entered a period of what one historian has referenced as collective amnesia. And it was the Vietnam War veterans who were greatly impacted by this desire to forget. They found they couldn't talk about their war experiences because no one wanted to rehash the agony of a war that had divided the nation. Veterans also had to contend with negative stereotypes of Vietnam veterans that were saturating American culture. One historian noted that, quote, the popular stereotype of the Vietnam veteran in the immediate post-war years was that of a drug-crazed, gun-toting, and violence-prone individual unable to adjust to civilized society, end quote. Supporters of the memorial felt that honoring those who served with a memorial would help restore the image of the American soldier to a position of dignity. So, along with a few other veterans, Scruggs formed the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund in April of 1979, and it was to start the process of having a memorial built. They hoped to avoid political opposition by promoting a memorial for soldiers who fought, not the war itself. You'll notice the name is the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, not the Vietnam Memorial. Once formed, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund sought to raise all the money without any government funding. This would allow them to promote the memorial to Congress as something that was not a burden to American taxpayers, but instead a gift from the American people to Vietnam veterans. And while some sizable contributions did come from large corporations and organizations, a larger number of contributions came from veterans and their family members. Many wrote letters noting that they viewed the memorial as a way to honor the dead and express their grief over the tragedy of the loss of loved ones and comrades. The first opposition the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund faced was in deciding the location of the memorial. Wanting a truly national memorial that could promote the nation healing from the war, Scruggs and other planners insisted it be on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., with memorials to Washington, Jefferson, and Lincoln in the shadow of the White House and the Capitol. The National Mall is hallowed ground, rich in the symbolism of American history. An alternate location was given that it would be on the path to Arlington National Cemetery. And on the one hand, that does seem fitting, since Arlington National Cemetery is the cemetery for the nation's war dead. Those at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund were afraid that it would become invisible, just as veterans had become invisible in the post-war years. The location that was proposed and ultimately chosen was recognized as being symbolic because it was near the Lincoln Memorial. So you can see this is after everything is added, the 3 Servicemen statue flagpole and Women's Memorial. There's the Lincoln Memorial reflecting upon, and if you keep going off the map, the Washington Memorial. But you can see from the map just how close it is to the Lincoln Memorial. And in introducing the resolution that would allow for the creation of the memorial, one senator wrote that its proximity to the Lincoln Memorial is fitting, for not since the Civil War had this nation suffered wounds and divisions as grievous as those endured over Vietnam. The symbolic implications of the proposed site were not lost on proponents of the memorial either. The National Mall had been the site of large protests against the Vietnam War during its duration. Having the memorial here could, therefore, recognize that division that existed while honoring those who had served. And you can see here in this aerial shot, so there's the wall itself, and just at the bottom, beyond the image, is the Lincoln Memorial, where you start to see that semicircle. Once the site was approved, the design would need to be chosen, and an open competition was held with the hopes that it would be the best way to build a memorial that would fulfill the lofty goals of reconciling a nation divided over a contentious war, honoring the war dead, and recognizing the service of current Vietnam veterans. And these goals were stated in the design competition booklet given to all entrants. Participants were also instructed that, quote, the memorial will make no political statement regarding the war or its conduct, and that the memorial should be reflective and contemplative in character, end quote. They were also provided a list of recommended reading, including things like Tim O'Brien's If I Die in a Combat Zone, to help familiarize contestants with what it was like to serve in Vietnam. But the winning designer, Maya Lin, intentionally chose not to read the books out of fear that any of the politics would then become a part of the design itself. Lin's design was chosen out of 1,420 entries. Her simple design, 2 black walls, 200 feet in length, pointing to the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial that listed the war dead and missing in action, was chosen over other entries that included submissions from a wide range of people. There were veterans, others were not. Some were novices to architecture, while some were some of the biggest names of the biggest companies of the time. Submissions included circles, semicircles, squares, Corinthian columns, miniature Lincoln memorials, and peace signs. There were towers, hovering helicopters, a giant army helmet, mausoleums, abstract figures, and obelisks. But Lin's design won the competition in part because it was believed that its simplicity would allow for more reflection. When she won, Lin was a 21-year-old undergraduate architecture student at Yale University. Her submission was actually part of a project completed for a class on funerary architecture. In the class, they examined the question, how does man deal with death through the built form? And the coursework for the class ensured that Lin had a good knowledge of the history of memorials. And the listing of names on a memorial was a common motif for World War I memorials. In fact, there's one on Yale's campus near the center part of campus that Lin surely would have walked through while going to classes. Her winning design was announced in May of 1981, and the abstract nature of the design allowed people to bring their own interpretations and emotions about the war to it in order to reflect on them. But as a news article at the time noted, it may have been this very strength of the design, its ability to be interpreted in a variety of ways, that made for the controversy surrounding it. Generally, the design was very well accepted. It was commended as a work of art that could accomplish all of the goals that were very varied that the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund hoped it would. Most veterans organizations cheered the design. However, a small group of vocal veterans opposed the memorial's design because they thought it was too abstract, not patriotic enough, did not honor the veterans of the war that were still living, and was too dissimilar from previous war memorials. Some criticized Maya Lin's background, pointing out her age, gender, and heritage. Among other things, they said that she could not understand war because she was a young woman, and she was not qualified to design a memorial about the war they had experienced. Opponents of Lin's design wanted a memorial that was above ground, more realistic than abstract, and the traditional white color of Washington, D.C. memorials. They also wanted a memorial that was more patriotic and what they considered more representative of the Vietnam War. Members of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund saw a compromise with the opponents as representative of the healing the nation itself needed to go through. So this meant adding a figural sculpture and placing an American flag at the site. Opponents to Lin's design thought the flag brought needed patriotism, while the sculpture would bring a more realistic representation of the war. Lin opposed these additions because she thought they violated the original concept of the design, and Jan Scruggs himself conceded, quote, aesthetically, the design does not need a statue, but politically it does, end quote. So while the wall was dedicated in 1982, the statue and flag were added and dedicated in 1984. The problem, however, was that once you had a representative statue added, those not represented by that statue felt that they were not being recognized. So a number of additional statues were proposed, but the only one actually added was the Vietnam Women's statue, dedicated in 1993 to recognize the women who served as nurses and physicians during the war. And the wall was able to help the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund give Vietnam veterans the welcome home they had never received by organizing a national salute to Vietnam veterans that took place from November 10th to 14th in 1982. The salute included a candlelit vigil held at the National Cathedral, where all of the names from the wall were read out loud, a parade to honor Vietnam veterans, reunion meetings, education panels on topics such as Agent Orange and post-traumatic stress disorder, and the dedication of the wall itself. The focus remained on recognizing veterans, as evidenced when a group of protesters arrived shouting slogans denouncing the Vietnam War, but hundreds of Vietnam veterans surrounded them and started singing "God Bless America," forcing the protesters to leave. The salute overall helped usher in the wall as a sacred site of healing. As early as the groundbreaking ceremonies, it was being referenced as a place of healing, and that language intensified after its dedication. But it was not just in the language used to describe the wall that helped it become a sacred space, but also the items left at its base by visitors. At first, the National Park Service thought that these were mistakes. They kept a lost and found and kept some of these items in the lost and found. And then they quickly realized that they were being left intentionally. So they created the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Collection and formed a catalog, right, to house these items. And it's everything from letters to award medals, pictures, wedding rings, military paraphernalia, and once a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. It's fair to say the wall very quickly entered the national lexicon as a sacred space of healing. But that's not to say there haven't been other points of contention since its dedication. One quickly became whose names are included on the wall. The only criteria the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund imposed on the National Design Competition was that a listing of the names of all those who died or were missing in action during the Vietnam War be included in the design. And if you take a very close look, it's really hard to see, but if you look to the left of Edgar F. Davis, sort of near the top center, you'll see that it's actually a cross. That's for anyone who was MIA. All of the diamond shapes are for those who they were actually able to recover and they know were killed. So the idea being that if you were MIA and you were found, the cross could be filled into the diamond. So in order to get this list of names, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund obtained the list from the Department of Defense, and the parameters to be included on this list were very strict. The death had to occur or be the direct result of an injury that occurred during the war in the war zone as designated by President Johnson's executive order. Despite endless fact-checking done by both the Department of Defense and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, mistakes were made because of the enormity of the task. There were a few names on the wall of people who had not passed, and there were other names of people who should have been on the wall. As errors were caught, omitted names were added to the wall, but this did not end all of the problems regarding the names on the wall. When the wall was first dedicated, it listed 57,939 names. It currently lists 58,318 names. Now that increase is largely due to the deaths since the end of the war due to war-related injuries. But that raises the question, what constitutes a war-related injury or death? People who died by suicide during the war are on the wall. But what about those who die later because of psychological problems stemming from the war? And this exact question became an issue in 2004 when the family of Air Force Captain Edward Allen Brudno, who died by suicide in 1973 after returning home from the war in Vietnam, lobbied to have his name on the wall. And Jan Scruggs held firm that his name should not be added. And it was in large part to discourage future suicide attempts. He was afraid that it would get others to do it just to be added to the wall because it has become what it is. It's a nationally recognized site. So in order to rectify this problem of how do you honor veterans who died from the war but do not fit those DoD criteria, a plaque was added, and we've already seen it, that says, "In memory of the men and women who served in the Vietnam War and later died as a result of their service, we honor and remember their sacrifice." The inscription is vague enough to include anyone who died as a result of service in Vietnam, regardless of how you define that service, how they died, or how they define the Vietnam War, because there are still disagreements over what constituted the war zone and what year it actually started for the United States. Now, those controversies mentioned arose throughout the memorialization process because of the high stakes placed on the historical messaging imbued in a national memorial. What would the legacy and the history of the Vietnam War be? Ultimately, the very debate about it seems to be a part of its legacy. Mylan recognized this as the controversies arose, saying, I think in a sense it's a part of the Vietnam controversy that's carried on. And that controversy continued in 2001 as the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund proposed an education center be added to the site. Because a major concern of any memorial is how does its message and lessons carry on beyond the generation of those who fought and those who created the site? Ultimately, as per a statement put out by the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, they weren't able to secure enough funding. So in 2018, they shifted goals to instead focus on online resources, handheld technology, education staff, mobile exhibits, and partnerships to teach visitors about the Vietnam War and honor those whose names appear on the memorial. But if you remember, I emphasized from the beginning that I'm a history professor and that I emphasize a few themes throughout my classes. In addition to emphasizing, as we've seen, that history is debated, I also emphasize that history surrounds us every day. Sometimes it's obvious, like in a history book, classroom, or a monument, but more frequently it's in ways we don't even realize. And it's to that point that I want to turn in order to recognize Veterans Day beyond the scope of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. As of 2019, there were about 20 million veterans living in the United States. Close to 350,000 of those veterans live in New Jersey. I give you these numbers because they help us recognize that even though we may not immediately recognize veterans because they may no longer be wearing a uniform, they are a part of our daily lives. If you indulge me for just a moment, I want to explain how our veterans are a part of my life. I am not a veteran, but my life has been shaped by experiences with veterans. This is seen in one of my previous jobs. As Dr. Iacono mentioned, I taught courses in Europe for the University of Maryland Global Campus. And the stories of students who were veterans helped enrich and enliven the classroom. This was perhaps most pronounced when teaching about the Dust Bowl in a U.S. history class. I put up a picture of the dust cloud and started to describe what it must have been like to experience a dust storm at the time. And I asked the class what they thought it might feel like to live through that. A veteran raised his hand and said, "Ma'am, I do know. It looks just like the sandstorms we dealt with in Iraq." As we move forward in time in the material for the class, he and other veterans added stories regarding their own service, and we were all thankful for it. In these classes, the children of veterans also shared the stories they heard from their parents. And it is here that I can turn to my own more personal experiences with a veteran. My father, a local boy from Pompton Plains actually, is a Vietnam War veteran. He was in the 5th Heavy Boat Company, 159th Transportation Battalion, 4th Transportation Command, 1st Logistical Command. It's a lot. He was stationed in Cat Lai from 1970 to 1971. This was well before my time, but his experiences there shaped my own because they left a lasting impression on him. For over 40 years, he thought about, talked about, and in many ways relived his time in Vietnam. He suffered from undiagnosed post-traumatic stress disorder until one day his body started to fail, and through being forced to treat his physical symptoms, he received treatment for his mental as well. To reconnect this to the history of the wall, I'll note that one day, one of the illnesses he has, recognized by the VA as connected to his service, may take his life. But as we've seen and understand, his name will not be added to the wall. But for him and other veterans of the Vietnam War who passed from service-related illnesses, there is an opportunity for recognition. We've already taken a look at the plaque that was added in 2004. But in addition to that plaque, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund created an in-memory honor roll. This is a part of that online component that they added rather than the education center. It's an online program that honors those who served in Vietnam, returned home, and later died. And you can see on the slides that each person recognized has pictures and a biography as part of their online profile. In addition to this online portion, There's an induction ceremony that the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund holds at the wall every year, and it's just one of several ceremonies that they hold at the memorial throughout the year. But thankfully, we aren't there yet for my father. So for now, I listen to his stories, because for all that time that he was a veteran, he was also, to me, Dad. A dad who had some amazing stories about his time in Vietnam, which certainly shaped my life and interest in history. A dad who taught me to honor our service members and the sacrifices they make. A dad who I'm proud to call a veteran. Many of us here today have that veteran in our lives. So I encourage you to honor our veterans by recognizing how they have sacrificed for our country and how they continue to enrich our lives in their post-war experience. And remember, as General Colin Powell said, on Veterans Day, put out your flags, cheer the marchers at parades, and go to tributes. But when you wake up the next day, November 12th, remember that it's still Veterans Day for our veterans, and it will be every day of their lives. And so to all the veterans, both those present here today and the wider veteran community, thank you today, tomorrow, and always.
Thank you so much, Dr. Iden. That was really special to hear. Next, we will be, playing a video presentation of the history of the Memorial Moving Wall.
The Vietnam Veterans Memorial is a national memorial in Washington, D.C., honoring service members of the United States Armed Forces who fought in the Vietnam War. Completed in 1982, the memorial site features two polished black granite walls etched with the names of over 58,000 service members who were killed in action in Vietnam and Southeast Asia during the war. After attending the memorial's opening ceremonies, John Devitt conceived of the moving wall, a traveling half-size replica of the wall, for those who do not have the opportunity to travel to Washington to pay their respects at the memorial. The moving wall made its debut in 1984 and has been on display at sites across America. On Friday, July 8th, VFW Troop 7333 brings the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Moving Wall to County College of Morris for a weekend display featuring ceremonies and salutes throughout the weekend.
Coming home isn't easy when you've been away so long. When Billy was only 18, he spent a lifetime in Vietnam, fighting in the darkness. Will the morning ever come? With sounds of battle all around, the war goes on and on. There were husbands, sons, and brothers who stood proud and brave and tall. You can read their names in granite when you're standing at the wall.
It's a moving and memorable event, to say the very least. I want to thank Bill Menzel, Emerson Crooks, and Deacon Rich Rec for helping us with today's program today, designing it and executing it as well. Those are the three same individuals, along with Senator Bucca, who were the anchor team who made bringing the wall possible, and it is an incredible undertaking to bring that to your community and then be able to make it available to all members of the community as well. I think it has certainly strengthened and touched the very soul of Morris County. Would you please join me in welcoming our state senator who cares deeply about our communities and what occurs throughout our state, Senator Tony Bucca.
Thank you, Dr. Iacona. It is always great to be here at the college. You know, CCM just always does it right. And that's why when Emerson came to me and we started to put a team together, I knew right where the wall belonged, and I knew right whose hands to put it in to make sure that it was done right and that I could rely on, and that was CCM. And I can't say enough about the college and the team and the staff that worked to make it happen. I can't say enough about VFW Post 7333. It is an amazing post here in Randolph. They worked so hard to make sure that the respect and dignity that the wall deserved was delivered, and you saw it in the video. They did a magnificent job. To the folks at Home Depot who showed up and lend the muscle to get it done right, to lay a floor so people had an easy path to get there. To all of the first responders that showed up, to the escort teams, you know, just everybody came together, to the Township of Randolph, to the freeholders. This was just a real community effort, and it really felt good to know that we were able to bring this here. Not every municipality has the honor of having that wall sit in its county, and to see it come to fruition was just an amazing, amazing thing. I can't say enough about today's program either. Professor, your historical perspective of the wall and your own experience was amazing to listen to. And I'm sure everybody here learned a little bit more about the wall than before they got here. And that's a tribute to you and the dedication that you have and what you bring, not only to this program, but to the students here. And you are an example of the fine faculty that makes CCM the greatest place to send your children and adults to further their education. As we approach Veterans Day, always remember, and you heard this number before, I think it was you, Professor, that said New Jersey is the home to probably close to 400,000 veterans. And we're lucky here in New Jersey. We've got great programs. We've got people like Emerson and other folks that put their shoulder down and help our veterans. And remember this, that the veterans that come home, their service is never really done. These are the same men and women that volunteer on our first aid squads. They volunteer at our fire departments. They serve on recreation committees. You know, they're out there in the community doing the job that they love to do, and that is serve. So we need to thank them. We need to thank them every day, not just on Veterans Days and on military holidays. We need to remember sacrifices that they made. And we also need to remember and understand that there are far too many that are homeless, that still suffer from the scars of war emotionally and physically. And we need to make sure that we have the resources to take care of these men and women as they age. And that should be all of our responsibilities, to make sure that we provide them with the care and comfort that they deserve. It is the least that we can do for those men and women that have protected our freedom and kept us safe. So I just want to thank everybody for being here today. And as you go into the holiday and you go to Veterans Day and you think about it, take some time, take your family to the service closest to your home, spend a little time with the veterans and say thank you. But remember, it's just not that day, it's every day. Thank you, and God bless you.
United States Coast Guard. We're always ready for the call. We place our trust in thee. Through surf and storm and howling gale, high shall our purpose be. Semper Paratus is our guide, our fame, our glory to fight, to save our fight and die. I, Coast Guard, we are for you. The United States Air Force. Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. Atom boys, give her the gun. Down we dive, spouting our flame from under, up with one hell of a roar. We live in fame or go down in flame. Ain't nothing will stop the U.S. Air Force. The United States Navy. Anchors away, my boys, anchors away. Farewell to foreign shores, we sail at break of day, 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 day. Through our last night on shore, drink to the foam. Until we meet once more, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. The United States Marine Corps. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we fight our country's battles in the air, on land and sea. First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine and the United States Army. First to fight for the right and to build a nation's might, and the Army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the Army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the Army's on its way. Now know the gate is on a strong. For wherever we go, you will always know that the Army goes rolling along. That the Army goes rolling along. Woo!
Dollars for a student veteran who would write an essay about what this moving wall meant to them. And the requirement was to watch 3 hours of video. So you saw part of that today. Joe Schulp has been a wonderful help to us with all the photography and all the video he's taken and the editing that he's done. So thank you, Joe. And perhaps you could make them available to everybody here, what we presented today as a memento. But in any case, Katie Olson is going to announce the winners and show the certificates that we have for these two students, actually, that one is our award and the other is another.
Yes, you'll notice in the front of your program, there's a listing of all of our veteran scholarships that we have that people have donated to over time. And so the first is a brand new scholarship for us through VFW Post 7333. And this year's recipient is going to be John Schuart. Unfortunately, he has class and so was unable to join us for lunch today, but we will arrange another time that they can meet with the folks from your post. But there's.
So here, John, wherever you may be, I hope you're enjoying your class. Dedicated student.
And then I'd also like to invite up here Juan Isais, who is a Marine veteran, 2 times deployed, or 2 times, yes. And Juan was also an applicant to the VFW, and so we are proud to offer him today our Veteran Family Scholarship. So, congratulations.
The requirement is that you have to join our post.
Yes, sir.
Here, come on over here, Bill, so we can get a picture even.
Okay.
Thank you, congratulations. So if you would just close the.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
perfect.
we're going to close the ceremony. You can continue eating. And thank you all for coming and participating. And thank everybody who helped us make this wall happen in this town, right? It was a highlight in my life. I got to tell you that. And I got a lot of highlights in my life, some of which I will not share. But thank you so much for today and everything you've done leading up to today, and for our future endeavors, because we're not done with the VFW around here. And you're all invited to come and have some sloppy joes this Friday at our ceremony at 11 o'clock. We're celebrating Veterans Day at our post on Carroll Road. I left some literature around there. And please, join us. Thank you so much.